Millionaire falls in love at first sight with the bridesmaid who was late to his friend's wedding. Ilara's battered sneakers squeaked a protest against the polished marble floor, a stark contrast to the symphony of designer heels clicking around her. The sound seemed to amplify in the cavernous lobby of Blackwood Industries, where every surface gleamed like it had been polished with liquid diamonds. Her reflection, distorted in the metallic elevator doors, confirmed what she already knew. In her wrinkled bridesmaid dress, with strands of hair escaping her hastily pinned updo, she looked like a dandelion that had wandered into a garden of orchids. "I'm so late," she muttered, checking her watch for the 15th time. The wedding ceremony had ended an hour ago, and somehow, miraculously, Ilara had managed to miss the entire thing despite being in the bridal party. A flat tire, a dead phone battery, and a taxi driver who insisted he knew a shortcut had conspired against her. Now all she wanted was to slip unnoticed into the reception and fulfill her bridesmaid duties before her best friend noticed her absence. The only problem? The hotel concierge had directed her to the wrong tower of the massive complex. Instead of the grand ballroom where Mia and Jason were celebrating their nuptials, Ilara had somehow wound up in the corporate headquarters of Blackwood Industries, which apparently shared the same address. "Excuse me," she called to a passing security guard, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the hushed atmosphere. "Could you direct me to the grand ballroom? I'm supposed to be at the Parker Chen wedding." The guard's eyes flicked over her disheveled appearance, one eyebrow arching slightly. "Wrong building, miss. You need the East Tower. This is the executive offices of Blackwood." "East Tower," Ilara repeated, shoulders slumping. "Of course it is. And how do I—" Her question was cut short by the sudden appearance of an elegant woman with a tablet. "Excuse me, are you the emergency flower delivery? Mr. Blackwood's assistant said you'd be in formal attire." "No, I'm not." "It doesn't matter who you are," the woman interrupted, grabbing Ilara's arm. "The arrangements for Mr. Blackwood's charity gala tonight haven't arrived, and he's absolutely livid. If you have any experience with flowers whatsoever, we need you on the 40th floor, immediately." Before Ilara could protest that her only experience with flowers was killing every houseplant she'd ever owned, she was being whisked into a private elevator that shot upward with stomach-lurching speed. "Mr. Blackwood doesn't accept excuses or delays," the woman continued, tapping frantically on her tablet. "He's exceptionally particular about presentations, especially for events bearing his name." Ilara opened her mouth to explain her situation, but stopped when the elevator doors slid open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Staff members hurried in every direction, carrying trays, adjusting lighting, and speaking urgently into headsets. At the center of it all stood a tall, broad-shouldered man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his back to her as he gestured emphatically at a trembling event coordinator. "That's Alexander Blackwood," the woman whispered. 35, billionaire CEO, notorious perfectionist. He built this company from the ground up in 10 years and doesn't tolerate anything less than excellence. Good luck." As if on cue, Alexander Blackwood turned, his piercing blue eyes locking directly onto Ilara. For a moment, everything around them seemed to freeze. Then Ilara's phone, which had finally regained enough charge to function, blared to life with 17 successive text message alerts, all from the panicking bride, wondering where her missing bridesmaid had disappeared to. "Would you like me to continue with the next section? Or would you like to make any changes to this introduction before I proceed?" "Retry, JC. Yes. Continue with the next section. Edit. I'll now write the rising action, just comedic chaos section of the script." Alexander Blackwood strode toward Ilara with purposeful steps, his expression unreadable. The room seemed to part before him like the Red Sea, staff members scattering to avoid his path. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall, with sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of a winter sky. A faint scar ran through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise flawless face. "You're the florist?" His voice was deep, with the slightest hint of a British accent. "Actually, I'm late," he finished for her. "Extraordinarily late. The gala begins in 3 hours." Ilara's phone continued its symphony of alerts. She fumbled to silence it, accidentally hitting the speaker button instead. Mia's panicked voice filled the awkward silence. "Ilara Jenkins, where the hell are you?" "I'm about to take wedding photos without my maid of honor." Alexander's eyebrow arched higher. "Jenkins. As in Jenkins Floral Design." "No, as in, I'm in the wrong building and need to get to my best friend's wedding reception immediately." Ilara blurted out. "I'm supposed to be in the East Tower. I'm not a florist. I'm a bridesmaid. A very, very late bridesmaid." She tried to step around him, but her heel caught on the marble floor. Arms windmilling, Ilara lurched forward directly into a passing waiter. The tray of champagne flutes he carried went airborne, creating a shimmering arc of expensive alcohol that somehow, defying all laws of physics and probability, landed primarily on Alexander Blackwood's immaculate suit. The entire room froze. Someone gasped. The waiter turned pale. "I am so sorry," Ilara whispered, mortified. She grabbed a napkin from the waiter's pocket and instinctively reached toward the CEO's chest, dabbing at the spreading stain. "This is fixable. Club soda and salt." "Do you have club soda?" "Who am I kidding? Of course you don't carry club soda in your pockets. That would be weird. I'm making this worse, aren't I?" She was babbling. She knew she was babbling. But Alexander Blackwood was staring at her with such intensity that her brain-to-mouth filter had completely short-circuited. "You're touching my chest," he stated, as if she might be unaware of this fact. Ilara snatched her hand back. "Right, sorry. Personal space. Very important." To everyone's shock, the corner of Alexander's mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "Patricia," he called to his assistant without taking his eyes off Ilara. "Find Miss Jenkins here directions to the East Tower, and get me a fresh jacket." "Actually," Patricia interjected nervously, "the floral company just called." Their delivery van broke down on the highway. They won't make it before the gala. Alexander's almost smile vanished. "Unacceptable." "The backup florist is booked solid," Patricia continued, "and the event space is completely empty." All eyes in the room turned to Ilara. She recognized that look. It was the same one her cat gave her right before pushing a glass off the countertop. "No," she said, backing away. No. I'm not a florist. I'm a graphic designer who occasionally keeps plants alive." "Occasionally?" Alexander studied her for a long moment. "Ms. Jenkins, I'm prepared to offer you $10,000 to solve my flower problem right now." Ilara's mouth fell open. $10,000? Plus car service to your wedding afterward, and my personal apology to the bride for borrowing her bridesmaid. "That's insane," Ilara sputtered. "That's business," he countered smoothly. "Do we have a deal?" 3 hours later, Ilara stood in the center of the Blackwood Foundation charity gala, surrounded by what could only be described as organized botanical chaos. After a whirlwind trip to 3 different flower markets and the wholesale district, armed with Alexander's black card and a rented van, she had transformed the sterile event space into something wild and wonderful. Instead of traditional centerpieces, she'd created an indoor garden that wound through the tables. Lush greenery, interspersed with dramatic blooms in deep burgundies and midnight blues. Fairy lights twined through hanging branches, creating the illusion of stars caught in a forest canopy. It wasn't what anyone had expected. It certainly wasn't what had been planned. But as guests began to arrive, their faces lit with delight at the unexpected enchantment. Alexander found her adjusting a final arrangement, still wearing her wrinkled bridesmaid dress, now accessorized with floral tape and a smudge of soil on her cheek. "This isn't what I ordered," he said, his expression inscrutable. Ilara's heart sank. "I know, and I'm sorry. I worked with what was available on short notice. If you hate it—" "I don't hate it," he interrupted. "It's unexpected, bold, rather like you." Something in his tone made her look up. Alexander was staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You ruined my favorite suit," he continued conversationally. "Commandeered my staff, spent an outrageous amount on orchids that weren't in the budget, and completely disregarded the approved design scheme." "Is this the part where you fire me from the job I never actually had?" Ilara asked, trying to remove a piece of floral wire that had somehow become entangled in her hair. Alexander stepped closer, reaching out to carefully disentangle the wire. His fingers brushed against her neck, and Ilara felt her pulse jump traitorously. "This is the part," he said softly, "where I ask you to stay for the gala." "I can't," she protested. "My friend's wedding—" "Will be nearly over by now," he finished. "You can make it for the cake cutting. I've already spoken to the bride." Ilara's eyes widened. "You what?" I explained the situation. Apparently, after viewing the photos my assistant sent, she's decided to forgive you. Something about finally putting that art degree to good use, and only you would stumble into a billionaire's charity event. Before Ilara could respond, a statuesque blonde in a skin-tight red dress appeared at Alexander's side, laying a possessive hand on his arm. "Darling, you've been hiding from me," the woman purred. "The governor is asking for you." "Vanessa," Alexander acknowledged coolly. "This is Ilara Jenkins, our floral designer." Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose as she assessed Ilara's disheveled state. "How creative. Alexander usually prefers a more sophisticated aesthetic." "Sometimes sophistication is overrated," Alexander replied, his eyes still on Ilara. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Well, the board members are eager to discuss the Milan acquisition. You know how important this deal is." She tugged his arm, pulling him away. Alexander allowed himself to be led, but glanced back at Ilara. "We're not finished here, Ms. Jenkins." "Sure we are," she called after him, unsettled by the strange flutter in her stomach. "You just don't know it yet." But as she watched him move through the crowd, stopping to greet guests with practiced charm while somehow appearing completely alone, even in the center of attention, Ilara had the sinking feeling that nothing about this bizarre day was finished at all. It was during the keynote speech that disaster struck. Halfway through Alexander's address about sustainable business practices, a catering assistant bumped into the dessert table, sending a chocolate fountain cascading to the floor. In the ensuing commotion, Ilara found herself thrust onto the stage as staff scrambled to clean the mess. "Perhaps," Alexander smoothly improvised, "Ms. Jenkins can share a few words about the sustainable sourcing behind tonight's remarkable floral designs." Ilara froze as hundreds of faces turned toward her. The spotlight felt like a police interrogation lamp. Her mouth went dry. She began eloquently, then caught Alexander's eye. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, and somehow that steadied her. Taking a deep breath, Ilara launched into a completely improvised talk about the local flower farms she'd visited that afternoon, the importance of seasonal blooms, and how sustainable practices created not just environmental benefits, but more authentic beauty. She had no idea where the words were coming from, but soon the audience was nodding along, even applauding at her passionate points. When she finished, Alexander stepped forward, his eyes shining with something that looked remarkably like admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I think we've just discovered the new creative director for the Blackwood Foundation's environmental initiative." The crowd erupted in applause. Vanessa's face darkened from across the room, and Ilara, standing under bright lights in her wrinkled bridesmaid dress, suddenly found herself the center of attention for all the right reasons. Later, as staff began clearing tables and guests said their goodbyes, Alexander found Ilara sitting alone on the terrace, feet freed from her painful heels and a stolen dessert plate balanced on her knees. "You're full of surprises, Ms. Jenkins," he said, loosening his tie as he took the seat beside her. "Chocolate-covered strawberry? Would you like me to continue with the next section, or would you like to make any changes to this section before I proceed?" "Retry, JC. Yes. Continue with the next section. Edit. I'll now write the development of relationship conflict section of the script." "I don't usually eat dessert," Alexander said, eyeing the chocolate-dipped strawberry Ilara offered him. "Let me guess. Sugar disrupts your perfectly optimized CEO productivity routine." Ilara teased, feeling strangely comfortable despite the absurdity of her situation. "Your loss." She bit into the strawberry with exaggerated delight. Alexander watched her for a moment, then unexpectedly reached out and took the remaining half from her fingers. "Perhaps I need to reassess certain routines," he said, popping it into his mouth. The casual intimacy of the gesture hung between them. "Are you serious about that job offer?" Ilara asked, changing the subject. "Because Environmental Initiative Creative Director sounds suspiciously like something you made up on the spot." "I never make offers I don't intend to keep," Alexander replied, his expression turning serious. "You have an unusual perspective, Ms. Jenkins. You see possibilities others miss." "I see flowers, Mr. Blackwood. It's hardly revolutionary." "You transformed a potential disaster into something memorable. That's a rare talent." He leaned forward slightly. "The Foundation's environmental work is important to me personally. We need someone who can communicate its value in unexpected ways." Before Ilara could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Where are you?" "Cutting cake in 20 minutes. Alexander Blackwood better have you in a limo heading here right now." "Your chariot awaits," Alexander said, nodding toward a sleek black car pulling up to the curb. "As promised." Ilara stood, suddenly awkward. "Well, thank you for the most bizarre job interview of my life." "This wasn't the interview," Alexander replied, standing as well. "The interview is Tuesday at 9, my office." "I haven't said yes yet," she reminded him. Alexander smiled, a real smile this time, transforming his severe features. "You will." 3 days later, Ilara found herself back in the Blackwood Industries lobby, this time in a carefully chosen outfit. Black pants, emerald blouse, and flats that wouldn't betray her if she needed to make a quick escape. Her portfolio was tucked under her arm, and she'd practiced answers to potential interview questions all night. What she hadn't prepared for was Vanessa Harrington lounging against the reception desk, looking like she'd stepped from the pages of Vogue. "Ilara Jenkins," Vanessa said, her tone suggesting she was identifying a particularly troublesome species of insect. "The flower girl." "Vanessa," Ilara replied evenly. "Lovely to see you again." "Alexander asked me to escort you up," Vanessa explained, leading her toward the elevator. "As head of corporate relations, I work closely with the foundation, very closely." The elevator ride was excruciating, filled with Vanessa's thinly veiled interrogation about Ilara's background, experience, and, most pointedly, relationship status. "Alexander has a type, you know," Vanessa said casually, as they stepped onto the executive floor. "Ambitious women who understand his world, women like me. Lucky for both of us, I'm here for a job, not a date," Ilara replied, refusing to be intimidated despite the obvious power imbalance. Vanessa's perfectly painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'd hate for you to be disappointed. Alexander can be impulsive with his charity projects, but the board, which includes my father, has final approval on all foundation hires." Before Ilara could respond, they arrived at Alexander's office. His assistant Patricia smiled warmly, a welcome contrast to Vanessa's frost. "He's waiting for you," Patricia said, "and he's been in a surprisingly good mood all morning. Whatever magic you worked at the gala, Ms. Jenkins, please keep it up." Vanessa's expression darkened. "I'll be sitting in on the interview," she announced. "Actually," Patricia countered smoothly, "Mr. Blackwood requested a private meeting." The look Vanessa shot Ilara could have frozen lava, but she retreated with practiced grace. "We'll talk soon, I'm sure." Alexander's office was unexpectedly warm, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, but softened by leather furniture and, surprisingly, several thriving plants. He rose when she entered, coming around his massive desk to greet her. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I'm still not convinced this is a real job," Ilara admitted, "but $10,000 buys a lot of curiosity." Something flickered across Alexander's face. "The money has already been transferred to your account. That matter is separate from this one." "Oh." Ilara shifted uncomfortably. "I thought that I was buying your employment," he finished. "I don't operate that way, Ms. Jenkins. You earned that payment with your work at the gala. This is something different." What followed was the strangest job interview of Ilara's life. Alexander barely glanced at her portfolio. Instead, he asked about her favorite parks, whether she believed in climate change initiatives for businesses, and how she'd explain photosynthesis to a 5-year-old. "You're unlike anyone I've met in business," he said finally, refreshingly authentic. "Most people call it awkwardly blunt," Ilara replied. "Most people are wrong." Alexander leaned back in his chair. "The position pays $150,000 annually, with full benefits. You'd have a team of 4 and report directly to me. The foundation offices are 3 floors down, but you'd have access to this level as needed." Ilara nearly choked. That's absurd. I was making $60,000 at my last job." "Then they were underpaying you dramatically," Alexander replied matter-of-factly. "I don't—" "Why me? You don't even know me." Alexander's eyes locked with hers. "I'm an excellent judge of character. It's how I built this company. And if I'm terrible at the job, you won't be." The conviction in his voice was unnerving. 2 weeks later, Ilara had an office with a view, a team of eager environmentalists, and a growing suspicion that she'd stumbled into an alternate reality. Her days were filled with planning awareness campaigns, coordinating with environmental scientists, and developing educational materials for schools in underprivileged areas. Alexander's particular passion project. She quickly discovered that while Alexander was demanding, he was also fair. He expected excellence but accepted thoughtful failure as part of innovation. His perfectionism was legendary throughout the company, yet he seemed unusually patient with Ilara's learning curve. Less patient was Vanessa, who found increasingly creative reasons to appear whenever Ilara and Alexander were working together. Her presence was always accompanied by reminders of her history with Alexander, references to private jokes, past events, and future plans. "You do know they used to be engaged, right?" whispered Marco, Ilara's graphic designer, after a particularly tense meeting where Vanessa had casually mentioned the villa in Tuscany she and Alexander had visited that magical summer. "What? No." Ilara felt a strange, hollow sensation in her chest. Not that it matters. It was the scandal of the season when they broke it off last year. Marco continued, clearly enjoying the gossip. "Her father's on the board, so they keep it civil, but rumor has it she's determined to reconcile." "That explains the death glares," Ilara muttered. "Word of advice, watch your back. Vanessa doesn't just compete, she eliminates." The warning proved prophetic. Ilara's first major presentation to the board, a proposed partnership with urban gardens in underserved communities, was a disaster. Her carefully prepared slides were somehow corrupted, replacement handouts went missing, and the projector mysteriously malfunctioned. Vanessa sat beside her father, smiling sympathetically as Ilara struggled through an impromptu verbal presentation. "Technology can be so unreliable," she murmured, while her father suggested that perhaps the Foundation's resources might be better directed toward more established initiatives. Afterward, Alexander found Ilara in her office, angrily gathering her things. "Going somewhere?" he asked from the doorway. "Home, to update my resume before I'm fired." "Why would you be fired?" Ilara stared at him incredulously. "Because I just bombed spectacularly in front of your board? Because Vanessa's father clearly thinks I'm incompetent? Because Vanessa sabotaged your presentation," Alexander finished, his voice dangerously quiet. Ilara froze. "You know, I suspected. Now I'm certain." He stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. Security footage shows her entering the conference room an hour before the meeting. IT confirmed the corrupted files were accessed with her credentials. "Why would she?" Ilara stopped, the answer suddenly obvious. "Oh." Alexander moved closer, his expression unreadable. "Vanessa and I have history, complicated history, but it's over." "It's none of my business," Ilara said quickly. "Isn't it?" His eyes held hers. "You've been here 3 weeks, and in that time, you've revitalized projects that have been stagnant for years. The team is energized. He paused, seemingly searching for words. "I find myself looking forward to our meetings." The air between them felt charged. Ilara became acutely aware of how small her office was, how little distance separated them. "Alexander," she began uncertainly. He stepped back, visibly collecting himself. "I've scheduled you to represent to the board next week. This time, I'll personally ensure there are no technical difficulties." That evening, working late to rebuild her presentation, Ilara was startled by a knock on her office door. It was Patricia, holding a paper bag. "Dinner," she explained. "Boss's orders. He says workaholics need to remember to eat." "That's rich, coming from him," Ilara replied, gratefully accepting the bag that contained her favorite Thai food from a restaurant across town. Patricia smiled knowingly. "He left 30 minutes ago to get it himself. Said he remembered you mentioning it was your comfort food." "He went himself?" Ilara was stunned. Doesn't he have people for that? He does, Patricia confirmed, her expression meaningful. He's never gotten takeout for anyone else in the building, not even Vanessa back when they were together. After Patricia left, Ilara sat with this information, unsure what to do with the warm feeling spreading through her chest. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't let Vanessa rattle you. Your ideas are exactly what the Foundation needs." Ilara found herself smiling at her phone like a teenager. With renewed determination, she turned back to her work, unaware that outside her office window, Vanessa stood in the shadows of the parking garage, watching with narrowed eyes as Ilara worked late into the night. "Would you like me to continue with the next section, or would you like to make any changes to this section before I proceed?" Retry, JC. "Yes, continue with the next section. Edit, I'll now write the climax/resolution of major conflict section of the script." The boardroom hummed with quiet tension as Ilara prepared for her second presentation. This time, she'd taken precautions. Backup files on multiple devices, hard copies distributed in advance, and a dry run with IT to ensure the equipment worked flawlessly. Alexander sat at the head of the table, his presence both reassuring and nerve-wracking. Vanessa arrived last, sliding into a seat beside her father with practiced elegance. "Ilara, darling," she said sweetly, "so brave of you to try again. Ms. Jenkins has made significant improvements to her proposal," Alexander stated firmly. "I believe the board will find it compelling." Ilara took a deep breath and began. This time, her presentation flowed perfectly. The Urban Garden Initiative now expanded to include educational components, employment opportunities for at-risk youth, and strategic partnerships with local restaurants to create sustainable supply chains. Her passion for the project shone through, and by the time she finished, several board members were nodding appreciatively. "Impressive recovery," said Vanessa's father, Howard Harrington, though his tone suggested skepticism. "But these community programs rarely succeed long-term. They require constant oversight, which diverts resources from more prestigious environmental initiatives." "With respect, Mr. Harrington," Ilara countered, "this program is designed to become self-sustaining within 18 months. The business model—" "Business model," Vanessa interrupted with a tinkling laugh. "These are gardens, not corporations. I wonder if perhaps Ms. Jenkins's background in, what was it again? Graphic design, leaves her ill-equipped to understand the financial complexities of foundation work." Alexander opened his mouth to interject, but Ilara caught his eye and subtly shook her head. This was her battle. "You're right that I'm not a financial expert, Ms. Harrington," Ilara acknowledged, "which is why I consulted with your foundation's financial team to develop these projections." She distributed a new set of documents. "You'll notice that the initial investment is recouped through reduced produce costs for our partner organizations, carbon offset credits, and the tax benefits of employing disadvantaged workers." Howard Harrington studied the numbers with narrowed eyes. "These projections assume significant community participation, which we'll achieve through the marketing strategy outlined on page 6, Ilara responded confidently. "We've already secured interest from 3 celebrity chefs and a major social media influencer who focuses on sustainability." The board meeting stretched for another hour, with questions becoming increasingly specific and technical. Through it all, Ilara held her ground, her answers thoughtful and well-researched. When the final vote came, 8-1 in favor with only Howard Harrington dissenting, Ilara felt a surge of triumph. "Congratulations," Alexander murmured as the board members filed out. You've impressed some very difficult people to impress." "Not all of them," Ilara replied, watching Vanessa engage in intense conversation with her father in the hallway. "The important ones," Alexander assured her. "Dinner tonight? To celebrate?" The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibilities. "I'd like that," Ilara said finally. Later that evening, as Ilara was preparing to leave, Patricia rushed into her office. "You need to see this," she said urgently, holding out her tablet. "It just went live on the company intranet." Ilara stared at the screen in horror. There, in the company announcements section, was a post that appeared to be from her account, outlining plans to drastically cut the Foundation's existing programs to fund her new initiative. Programs that various board members had personal connections to. The post included inflammatory language about outdated approaches and moving past the old guard. "I didn't write this," Ilara gasped. "Someone hacked my account." "It gets worse." Patricia swiped to reveal an email chain, apparently between Ilara and Alexander, discussing how to manipulate the board into approving her projects. The messages portrayed Ilara as calculating and Alexander as easily influenced by her, suggesting an inappropriate relationship that compromised his judgment. "These are completely fabricated," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "I would never—" "I know," Patricia interrupted, "but the timestamps and account information look legitimate. IT is investigating, but the damage is spreading. Board members are already calling Alexander." As if summoned by his name, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "My office, now." The walk to his office felt like a death march. Inside, Vanessa was already seated, her face a mask of concern. "Alexander, I came as soon as I heard," she said, rising to place a hand on his arm. "This is unconscionable." "What's unconscionable is framing a colleague," Ilara retorted, her shock giving way to anger. "You did this." Vanessa's eyes widened in practiced innocence. "That's a serious accusation. Why would I sabotage the Foundation's work?" "Not the Foundation's work, mine." Ilara turned to Alexander. "She's trying to discredit me because she thinks there's something between us." "And is there?" Vanessa challenged. Alexander's face remained impassive. "Vanessa, I'd like to speak with Ilara alone." "Darling, be careful," Vanessa warned, squeezing his arm before departing. "She's clearly unstable." When the door closed, Alexander's professional facade crumbled. "Tell me you didn't write those messages." "Of course I didn't," Ilara exclaimed. "How could you even question that?" "I had to ask," he said wearily, running a hand through his hair. "The board is in an uproar. Howard Harrington is calling for your immediate termination." "And what do you think?" Ilara asked quietly. Alexander moved closer, his voice dropping. "I think someone with intimate knowledge of our systems set you up. The question is why?" "You know why," Ilara said softly. "Vanessa." "I need proof," Alexander replied. "Accusations against a board member's daughter require irrefutable evidence." "And if I can't provide that?" Alexander's expression was pained. "Then I'll have to place you on administrative leave while we investigate. The board is demanding action." Ilara felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "You'd really do that? After everything?" "I don't have a choice, Ilara. This company, this foundation, they're bigger than just me. There are protocols." "There's always a choice," she interrupted, grabbing her bag. "And yours is clear." As she stormed toward the door, Alexander caught her arm. "Don't leave like this. Help me fix it." For a moment they stood frozen, the connection between them almost tangible. Then Ilara gently removed his hand. I think you've been alone at the top for so long that you've forgotten how to trust anyone but yourself," she said sadly. "I won't be another project you can control, Alexander." That night, instead of dinner with Alexander, Ilara found herself in her small apartment, surrounded by empty takeout containers and her old laptop. If Vanessa wanted a fight, she'd get one. With skills left over from her wilder college days, Ilara dug into the company's system logs, tracing the fraudulent posts. By 3 a.m., she had what she needed: digital fingerprints leading directly back to Vanessa's private device, time-stamped access codes, and evidence of previous attempts to access Ilara's accounts. What she didn't expect to find was evidence of something far worse. Hidden in Vanessa's secured files were plans for the Milan acquisition Alexander had mentioned at the gala, plans that revealed Vanessa and her father intended to secretly sell off Blackwood's environmental technology patents to competitors once the deal closed, netting millions while gutting the company's most innovative division. As dawn broke, Ilara's doorbell rang. Bleary-eyed, she opened it to find Alexander standing there, looking as exhausted as she felt. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted. "I've been up all night reviewing security logs. I'd found evidence." "That Vanessa framed me," Ilara finished. "I know. I found it too." She hesitated. "But there's more, much more." She showed him the documents she'd discovered. Alexander's expression darkened as he read, his jaw tightening. "The Milan deal is my legacy," he said quietly. "The technology we're developing could revolutionize clean energy access in developing nations. They were going to destroy it for profit." "I'm sorry," Ilara said softly. Alexander looked up, his eyes intense. "Number, I'm sorry. You were right, I've forgotten how to trust. Running a company like this, you become a target. Everyone wants something. After a while, you stop letting people close." "And Vanessa?" "Was familiar, safe. Her ambition matched mine, or so I thought." He moved closer. "You terrify me, Ilara. From the moment you spilled champagne on me, you've been completely unpredictable." "Most people find that annoying," she said, her heart racing. "I find it extraordinary," he murmured, his hand rising to cup her cheek. "You force me to see things differently." Before Ilara could respond, Alexander's phone rang. Patricia, calling with urgent news. The board had convened an emergency meeting. Vanessa and Howard had presented a motion to remove Alexander as CEO, citing questionable judgment and inappropriate relationships with subordinates. "They're moving faster than I anticipated," Alexander said grimly. "They must know we're onto them." "What now?" Ilara asked. Alexander's expression hardened with determination. "Now we end this, together." The emergency board meeting was already in progress when Alexander and Ilara arrived at Blackwood Tower. Howard Harrington stood at the head of the table, midway through what appeared to be a prepared statement about regrettable but necessary leadership changes. "I believe you're in my seat, Howard," Alexander said calmly, striding into the room. Vanessa rose to her feet. "Alexander, this is inappropriate. You've been temporarily relieved." "No, Vanessa," Alexander interrupted. "What's inappropriate is corporate espionage, or should we discuss the Milan patents you planned to sell?" The room erupted in confusion. Alexander held up his hand, quieting the chaos. "Board members, you've been misled. I have evidence that Vanessa and Howard Harrington have been working to undermine this company for personal gain." With methodical precision, Alexander and Ilara presented their findings: the falsified communications, the access logs, and most damning, the secret plans for the patents. As the evidence mounted, Howard Harrington's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is absurd," he blustered. "These documents could easily be fabricated, just like the ones supposedly from Ms. Jenkins." "The difference," Ilara interjected, "is that these can be independently verified by any digital forensics expert. The encryption keys are registered to Vanessa's personal device." Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "You self-righteous little nobody," she hissed at Ilara. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? My family built half this city." "Yet apparently couldn't build a decent moral compass," Ilara replied evenly. Alexander addressed the board directly. "I move for the immediate removal of Howard Harrington from this board and the termination of Vanessa Harrington's employment with Blackwood Industries." The vote was unanimous. As security escorted the Harringtons from the building, Vanessa turned back, her eyes locked on Ilara. "This isn't over. No one walks away from me, not Alexander, and certainly not some nobody who stumbled into the wrong building." Alexander stepped protectively closer to Ilara. "Actually, Vanessa, I think she stumbled into exactly the right building." Hours later, after statements to legal counsel and reassurances to anxious shareholders, Alexander and Ilara found themselves alone in his office, the city lights twinkling below them. "What happens now?" Ilara asked. Alexander moved to stand beside her at the window. "Now the real work begins. We salvage the Milan deal, restructure the board, rebuild trust with our partners." "That's not what I meant," Ilara said softly. Alexander turned to face her, vulnerability clear in his expression. "I know." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm not good at this, Ilara. Relationships, trust. I've spent a decade building walls around myself." "Good thing I never bothered learning how to color inside the lines," she replied with a small smile. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes," he warned. "I'm stubborn, demanding, and occasionally terrible at communicating. And I'm chronically late, horrifically blunt, and have killed every houseplant I've ever owned," Ilara countered. "But I'm willing to try if you are." Instead of answering, Alexander pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt both inevitable and surprising, gentle at first, then deepening with months of pent-up longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ilara laughed. "I guess that's a yes?" "That," Alexander said, his eyes alight with promise, "is just the beginning. Would you like me to continue with the final section, or would you like to make any changes to this section before I proceed?" Retry, JC. Yes. Continue with the next section. Edit, I'll now write the falling action denouement section of the script. 1 year later, the rooftop garden of Blackwood Tower glowed with fairy lights, transforming the corporate space into an enchanted oasis. Potted trees created natural archways, while wildflowers erupted from planters designed by local artists. In the center, a small dance floor had been laid out, surrounded by tables where Blackwood employees and foundation partners mingled. "You've outdone yourself," Alexander said, approaching Ilara from behind and wrapping his arms around her waist. "The first anniversary of the Urban Gardens Initiative deserves a celebration, but this is spectacular." Ilara leaned back against his chest, surveying their handiwork with pride. 12 new gardens, over 200 jobs created, and 3,000 families with access to fresh produce. Not a bad year's work. "And to think," Alexander mused, "none of it would have happened if you hadn't gotten lost on your way to a wedding." "Best wrong turn I ever took," Ilara laughed, turning in his arms to face him. The past year had softened Alexander's edges. He smiled more easily now, and though he remained intensely focused on his work, He'd learned to delegate and, occasionally, to leave the office before midnight. Ilara had changed, too. Her natural confidence had grown into true leadership, her creative vision now backed by business acumen she'd developed under Alexander's mentorship. Their relationship had weathered initial skepticism, office gossip, tabloid speculation, and the inevitable challenges of two strong personalities learning to compromise. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Marco's voice over the sound system, "if I could have your attention, as the self-appointed master of ceremonies and the person who had to watch these two dance around their feelings for months, it's my pleasure to introduce the founders of our Urban Gardens initiative, our CEO, Alexander Blackwood, and our brilliant creative director, Ilara Jenkins." Applause erupted as Alexander led Ilara to the center of the gathering. He squeezed her hand before turning to address the crowd. A year ago, this initiative was just an idea, one that faced significant opposition, Alexander began. Many said it was too ambitious, too unconventional, too risky. His gaze found Ilara's. But sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the greatest discoveries. As Alexander continued his speech, highlighting the program's successes and thanking the team, Ilara felt a surge of emotion. She remembered the chaos of that first day, the wrong building, the spilled champagne, the wild improvisation that had somehow led her here. "And now," Alexander concluded, "I'd like to turn the floor over to the real visionary behind this project, the woman who taught me that sometimes the best plan is having no plan at all." Ilara stepped forward, her prepared remarks suddenly forgotten, as she looked out at the faces of people whose lives had been changed by an idea she'd once thought impossible. "When I accidentally wandered into Blackwood Tower a year ago," she began, "I was lost, late and covered in potting soil, not exactly CEO material." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "But sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time turns out to be exactly right," she continued. "This initiative isn't just about gardens or jobs or even sustainability. It's about possibility, the possibility that exists when we open ourselves to unexpected opportunities." As she spoke, Ilara caught Alexander watching her with an expression that still made her heart skip a beat. A mixture of pride, admiration, and something deeper that had grown between them over months of late nights, shared challenges, and quiet moments of understanding. When the speeches concluded and music filled the air, Alexander led Ilara to the dance floor. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Alexander," Ilara warned, "if that's what I think it is." "It's not a ring," he assured her, with a smile. "At least, not yet. I know better than to rush you." Inside the box was a delicate silver key. "What's this for?" Ilara asked, confused. "The cottage in Vermont," Alexander explained. "The one you said would be perfect for weekend retreats. I bought it last month." Ilara stared at him in shock. "You bought a house without telling me." "I bought a house for us," he corrected. "For weekends, holidays, eventually." He hesitated, then continued softly. "Maybe someday, for more than that." The implication hung between them, a future together, away from the corporate world they'd been consumed by, a place where they could simply be Alexander and Ilara, not CEO and creative director. "It has a garden," he added, watching her reaction carefully. "A real one, with actual soil and plants that will need someone to take care of them." "Are you sure you want to entrust living things to my care?" Ilara teased, though her eyes had grown suspiciously bright. "My track record isn't great." Alexander pulled her closer. "I trust you with everything," he murmured. "Including my heart, which was pretty neglected before you stumbled into it." That, Ilara said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him, might be the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I'm improving, he acknowledged with a smile, slowly. As they danced beneath the stars, surrounded by the fruits of their unlikely partnership, Ilara thought about how drastically her life had changed in a year. From a graphic designer perpetually running late to the creative force behind a revolutionary urban renewal project. From a woman who had always played it safe to someone who had taken the biggest risk of all, falling in love with the most unexpected person. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Ilara smiled up at him. "I'm thinking that being late to a wedding was the best mistake I ever made." "I wouldn't call it a mistake," Alexander replied, spinning her gently under the twinkling lights. "I'd call it fate." Alexander Blackwood believing in fate? Ilara gasped in mock horror. What's next? Spontaneous vacations? Casual Fridays? "Don't push it," he warned, though his eyes crinkled with amusement. "I still have a reputation to maintain." "Your secret's safe with me," Ilara promised, laying her head against his chest as they swayed to the music. Most of them, anyway. From across the rooftop, Patricia watched the couple with satisfaction. She leaned over to Marco, who was documenting the event for the Foundation's social media. "I knew it from the first day," she confided, the moment she spilled that champagne on his favorite suit, and he didn't fire her on the spot. "Love at first disaster," Marco agreed, snapping a candid photo of Alexander whispering something in Ilara's ear that made her laugh. The best kind. As the night drew to a close, Alexander and Ilara slipped away from the celebration, making their way to the private elevator. "Ready to see the cottage this weekend?" Alexander asked as the doors closed behind them. "Absolutely," Ilara replied, her fingers intertwining with his. "Though I should warn you, I make no promises about keeping those plants alive." "I'll take my chances," Alexander said, pulling her close for a kiss as the elevator began its descent. "Some risks are worth taking." And as the elevator carried them down toward the future they were building together, one unexpected turn at a time, Ilara knew he was right. Some wrong turns weren't wrong at all. They were just the universe's way of putting you exactly where you needed to be.